The process we go through to evaluate whether it's a film or project we should get involved in is driven by two things. One, really weighing the decision more. Is there an audience for it? And when I say that, is there a distributor around the world that thinks there's an audience for it? So we have to convince distributors, who we call our clients, that there's an audience in their country for it. And in many times that's difficult because the filmmaker and we may know there is an audience, but there's always that threshold of how big the audience is and how difficult it's going to be to get to them. So I go back to least amount of effort for the greatest return. If the distributor thinks there's going to be a lot of work to get to the consumer/audience, they're going to hesitate. If they have a tough time imagining how the film's going to be marketed, what's the genre, what's the poster going to look like, what's the trailer going to look like, and what film within the last 6 to 12 months is this most similar to that was successful? And if those answers aren't positive, the distributor's going to hesitate. So we try and put ourselves into the shoes of our clients the best we can. We evaluate projects in several different ways, but most specifically what we're looking for is if there's an audience for the film. And taking that one step further, do our distributors think and are convinced there's an audience for the film? And how much effort do they have to put in to reach that audience? Now, there are some specific elements that we are looking for when we see a film. The cast, most important. Who's in the film? How known is this cast internationally? That is the number one most important element to a film today. As the business gets more difficult, more selective, more challenging, more competitive, the one question you get asked from everyone, who's in it? And that is because, unlike the studios, who can spend their way into the consciousness of a consumer, we can't. And so it's not uncommon that a studio spends $200 million on a movie and casts the lead as a relatively unknown actor. The Force Awakens, who knew John Boyega yet, right? Not really. The world really didn't know him or the actress that plays Rey, right? But the brand and that director and that movie and how much money they spent on P&A doesn't matter. They were making stars. They're in the business of making stars. In the independent space, we're the opposite. We have to kind of take advantage of the stars that have been made, which is why you'll see a Bruce Willis movie on VOD that you've never heard of, and Bruce is in it for 5 minutes. Same with Stallone, same with Jason Statham, and etc. A lot of actors that were A-list movie stars in the 90s are showing up in independent films today because you don't have to spend money on a huge amount of marketing to the consumer to educate them on what this is. It's a Bruce Willis action film. Look at that poster. It's at least worth you clicking on, right? That's why there's intrinsic value in those films. And I always kind of refer to this virtual guide of commerciality, right? On one side of the spectrum, the most commercial independent film is an action film with a major A-list star from the 90s. And The Expendables defined that because it was an action film with every A-list star from the 80s and 90s, right? That's why they made it. That's exactly why they did it. They said to themselves, if we had the perfect film for the independent marketplace, what would it be? An action film with Stallone. And then they said, well, what if it was an action film with Stallone and Schwarzenegger? And, So The Expendables is a great litmus test for like the best type of film to sell in the independent space. And we know from experience the film did well and the sequels did well, etc. The further you get from that side of the spectrum, your value decreases, your chances of distribution decreases, the capability to get the film financed decreases, etc. So on the other side of the spectrum, I would say it's a black and white drama in a language other than English. That's the other side of the spectrum. Now, someone watching this or in the classroom or an audience somewhere in the world may say, I love those films. That's what I'm seeking out and I can't find them. And if I can't find them, there must be other audiences that want to see them. Shouldn't there be an opportunity for them? No, there isn't. because it needs not just be made well, it needs to win the Oscar. Not just be made well, it needs to win the Oscar to have any chance of awareness or distribution. So that's really two sides of the spectrum, right? Modern day action film with A-list stars, English language, fun, very accessible. It can play on every TV channel, every airline, every movie theater, every language, every audience. It transcends all of that.